Islam. So this is an act to preserve racial integrity. This is again Virginia. Islam. You can go ahead and read, Brother Abraham.
Islam, 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 an act to preserve racial integrity. Number one, be it enacted by the General Assembly of Virginia that the state register of vital statistics may, as soon as practicable after the taking effect of this act, prepare a form whereon the racial composition of any individual as Caucasian, Negro, Mongolian, American Indian, Asiatic Indian, Malay, that's just Malaysian, or any mixture thereof, or any other non-Caucasic strains. And if there be any mixture, then the racial composition of the parents and other ancestors, insofar as ascertainable, so as to show in what generation such mixture occurred, may be certified by such individual, which form shall be known as a registration certificate. The state register may supply to each local registrar a sufficient number of such forms for the purpose of this act. Each local registrar may personally or by deputy, as soon as possible after receiving said forms, have made thereon in duplicate a certificate of the racial composition as the aforesaid of each person resident in his district. Whoso desires, born before June 14, 1912, which certificate shall be made over the signature of said person, or in the case of children under 14 years of age, over the signature of a parent, guardian, or other person standing in loco parentis. One of said certificates for each person thus registering in every district shall be forwarded to the state register for his files. The other shall be kept on file by the local register. Every local registrar may, as soon as practicable, have such registration certificate made by or for each person in his district who so desires, born before June 14, 1912, for whom he has not on file a registration certificate or a birth certificate. Number two, it shall be a felony for any person willfully or knowingly to make a registration certificate false as to color or race. The willful making of a false registration or birth certificate shall be punished by confinement in the penitentiary for 1 year. For each registration certificate properly made and returned to the state register, the local register returning the same shall be entitled to a fee of 25 cents to be paid by the registrant. Application for registration and for transcript may be made direct to the state register, who may retain the fee for expenses of his office.
Islam, you can stop right there. Gratitude.
Islam.
Islam. So, Morris, what does this sound like? I mean, don't this sound familiar? Don't this sound real familiar? It sounds real familiar, right? Islam?
Islam.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And this is how it became legal to you know, not just, so we're not just going to continue on to denationalize you mentally. We're literally creating a corporate fiction of you, because we can't have control over you any longer, right? Because slavery was abolished in what year?
1865.
1865, slavery is abolished, right? After the Civil War, we went and participated in our own unions. So being a part of a union, you got union rights. You know, no one can just tell you how much you're going to make. No one can just enforce on you how you're going to get vacation time and, you know, sick leave and all these things. This is what the union is providing all of the workers. And so slavery is gone now. Everyone has participation in their own union. And now, because not only do we have you as the Negro, the color, the Afro-American, etc., right? Now we got to put you into enslavement so that you don't receive what's due to you by being in the union. So we're going to so instead of fighting you that way, we're just going to go ahead and create a whole fictitious corporation out of you. We're going to go ahead and let the registrar of the state create a birth certificate. Wow. Islam, Brother A. Griffinell, you can continue to read. Gratitude.
Islam, gratitude. Number 4, no marriage license shall be granted until the clerk or deputy clerk has reasonable assurance that the statements as to color of both man and woman are correct. If there is reasonable cause to disbelieve that applicants are of pure white race, when that fact is stated, the clerk or deputy clerk shall withhold the granting of the license until satisfactory proof is produced that both applicants are white persons, as provided for in this act. The clerk or deputy clerk shall use the same care to assure himself that both applicants are colored when that fact is claimed. It shall hereafter be unlawful for any white person in this state to marry any, save a white person, or a person with no other admixture of blood than white and American Indian. For the purpose of this act, the term white person shall apply only to the person who has no trace whatsoever of any blood other than Caucasian, but persons who have 1/16 or less of the blood of the American Indian and have no other non-Caucasic blood shall be deemed to be white persons. All laws heretofore passed and now in effect regarding the intermarriage of white and colored persons shall apply to marriages prohibited by this act. Number 6, for carrying out the purposes of this act and to provide the necessary clerical assistance, postage, and other expenses of the state registrar of vital statistics. 20% of the fees received by local registrars under this act shall be paid to the State Bureau of Vital Statistics, which may be expended by the said bureau for the purposes of this act. Number 7, all acts or parts of acts inconsistent with this act are, to the extent of such inconsistency, hereby repealed. Islam.
Islam, gratitude. Islam. It further reads in the appendix, Alexander Francis Chamberlain, PhD, assistant professor of anthropology, Clark University, says in some regions, considerable intermixture between Negroes and Indians has occurred. Example, among the Paumonkeys, Mataponies, and some other small Virginia and Carolinian tribes. It is also thought probable that many of the Negroes of the whole lower Atlantic coast and Gulf region may have strains of Indian blood. This probably accounts for the increasing number of Negroes who are now writing to our Bureau demanding that the color on their birth certificate and marriage license be given as Indian. As Indian. They said this probably accounts for the increasing number of Negroes who are now writing to our Bureau demanding that the color of their birth certificates and marriage license be given as Indian. Well, ain't that something? Now, remember last week when we went over what was that we went over last week?
The $5 Indians.
We did go over the $5 Indians. That's right. We also, thank you, brother McClaudio. We definitely went over the $5 Indians. We also went over the an act concerning servants and slaves of 1705, which was the part of the Indian Removal Act of 1830, okay? Because that's when it started in 1705. When you look at the Indian Removal Act, right, and you look at an act concerning servants and slaves of 1705, you begin to see that much of what was done and what was put on us was a series of events. So it wasn't just the treaties, right? There was constant legislation that was created. So in 1705, Virginia said, hey, not only are we going to keep adding on later on, but let's go ahead and start creating now different acts and legislation that's not going to allow them to any longer be considered as quote unquote American Indians, right? They all have to be what? What was the title that we all had to be in the 1705 Act?
Negro.
Negroes. Negro. All right, so they changed us from American Indian, parts of from, it wasn't Negro, my bad. It was mulatto, Islam. So they changed us from American Indian to mulatto. And then throughout time, we went from mulatto to Negro, from Negro to color, from color to black, from black to African American. This is the constant change of these titles of, or these badges of slavery. Islam.
Islam.
So we see here also that it says that you couldn't receive a marriage license, like you couldn't get married. And if you opted in being a Negro, right, you had to not only say that you was a Negro, but you had to make sure, like they had to verify that you was a Negro. Right, it says, no marriage license shall be granted until the clerk or deputy clerk has reasonable assurance that the statements as to color of both man and woman are correct. Islam, go ahead, brother. Claudio, you got your hand raised.
Well, I want to make sure I'm clear, and maybe I'm the only one. So we wasn't never getting married before they started issuing licenses right here?
No, we was getting married. That's what I was trying to figure out. You know, back in the day, if you was a slave, you couldn't get married. But apparently, you know, they allow all the slaves on the plantation to get married because we sure was getting married.
Right. That's all of a sudden we got to start issuing these licenses now.
Yeah, because we gotta create the birth certificate and the marriage license so that we can now tax you. And you got a different tax if you was quote unquote color. Yeah, your tax was different. Islam. So we not just gonna take your land from you. We're not just gonna change your racial classification. You know, we're not just gonna continue to abuse you. You know, because we can't abuse you any longer. You know, the way that we used to abuse you when we literally switched our position from you. Now we've taken your position and now you have our position. And so we're going to create this legislation to forever keep you in our position. Because we don't, I mean, European slavery, we don't never want to go under that European slavery again. We're going to make sure that we never go under that European slavery. So we're going to make sure that we'll do everything possible that we can to put you under European slavery. Because we ain't going to never be European slaves no more. Islam?
Islam.
So, because remember, the 13 colonies was so that the property of the colonies, the European colonies, could work off their debts. Islam. So it, this is, we can see here that, you know, it created a certificate for birth as well as a marriage license. So, and this marriage license, they had to verify in that you wasn't a different race. Right? You had to be the pure white race. right? Or you could be American Indian. But remember, this is for the $5 Indians, because they already took that Indian, American Indian status from us. You know, they been took away more and made us all Christians. Long time ago, right? They made us all Christians by making us Indian. Then from Indian, because this Indian is a corporate trading name. They went from Indian to now you a Negro, or you're a mulatto. In Virginia, to be exact, it was mulatto. So as we see here, they have now taken and put us into these contracts so that they can tax us for the contracts. Because we ain't making the money that we was, that, you know, that we not making the money that we was before. When the Confederates said, no, we refuse to pay the North the taxes that you're asking for. So everybody lost out. It wasn't just the South, and it wasn't just the North. The world lost out when the Civil War came, or the at that time those were the Seminole Wars as well. The Seminole Wars. Everybody lost out because all of the raw materials and goods is down south, and then all the industry is up north for the final product. Islam.
Islam. What year do you say this was, governors?
This act,
Yes.
1924.
Okay.
Since 1924.
So this was something that, from what I'm reading, this is something that was created for the Negro, so-called Negro, because this doesn't appear to me to be for Moors.
Well, this is what they called us. They had us on record as colored folks and Negroes in 1924.
Islam.
Islam. I mean, that's what Prophet Noble Ali was teaching against. You know, showing us in the 1920s that we didn't have to go under these badges of slavery.
Islam.
So it was this legislation and much other legislation like this in the Union States that was created to continue to put us under these badges and enforce these badges on us. Islam.
So as long as you didn't know your proper status, then this would pertain to you. To anyone who didn't know their proper status or didn't proclaim their nationality. Because what I'm getting out of this is, for what purpose was the Moorish Science Temple of America founded? For the uplifting of fallen humanity. Humanity has fallen a great depth when we have information like this that is being perpetrated on us as a people under the badges of Negro, Black, color. This to me is fallen humanity, part of it. Islam?
Islam, indeed. Because it created the corporate fictions through the birth certificate and the marriage license.
Islam. Absolutely.
Islam. Any questions or comments? before we move on to the Virginia Eugenical Sterilization Act in 1924?
So Islam. So it seems that this all started in Virginia, and then each state kind of attached themselves or modeled themselves after this.
Correct. Yep.
Islam. And what was the name of that act of 1924?
Racial Integrity Act.
Islam. Racial Integrity Act, 1924.
Islam. All right, any more comments or questions? Y'all are real quiet.
Well, I have a question relative to this. So the answer is maybe more just an affirmation, because the question is, as the prophet said to us, I want to ask, is the Moorish Science Temple of America? Because this question gives us the backdrop of such acts and such degradation of our people. So is Moorish Science Temple of America, as instructed, is it the only sole foundation that all Asiatics must depend upon for their earthly salvation as American citizens? And that is what sets us aside from being under the iron hand oppression of such acts as these, Islam?
Islam, I would definitely say, I mean, the Moorish Science Temple of America is the only sole foundation that all Asiatics must depend upon for their earthly and divine salvation, because it is the only organization still to this day that provides you with a way to proclaim your nationality, to participate within your own government, and to no longer be under the corporate fiction. I mean, they literally created corporate fictions in this act with the state registrar through the birth certificate and the marriage license. That's not coincidental, because even still to this day, the reason why we go through what we go through, and this is everyone, it doesn't even matter what your race is, I mean, now today, what your nationality is today, all of us go through the same exact thing when we contract to take on a marriage certificate and birth certificate. Right. It has not changed. It only has gotten worse because that's what they use to put us in all the other contracts. It starts at the county registrar. It's the county, literally.
So with that being said, I have one additional question, and that is there any truth to the action of rescinding a birth certificate or rescinding a marriage license to not be under that contract, Islam?
For Moorish Americans, you have to start with Act 6 in your Divine Constitution and Bylaws. Because Act 6 is your proclamation that you're not a Christian. Because this is making you Christian property. The birth certificate and the marriage license. So that's how we start as true American citizens.
Islam, got it.
Islam. You know, it's not one of those things where you just, you know, rescind the contract, but you have to, you know, put on proclamation or make proclamation that you're not Christian property. And that's what it means when the prophet said this is the only sole foundation for all Asiatics. For all Asiatics to depend upon. Islam.
Islam.
So basically it comes back down to, again, the understanding that religion or the body politic of religion is actually the government, and which gives us the rights, gives us the authority, so to speak, and takes us out of that. I think you just mentioned it as being Christian property.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's right. Islam. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, so the idea of religion, so to speak, is not really about spirituality or what we like to believe as, you know, spirituality or our relationship with the Creator, more so than it is dealing with our rights and governing.
It's always been about law. Religion has always been about law. This is why you have so many laws in religious societies. It's always been about law. Even when you go back to looking at the laws that the so-called children of Israel was supposed to follow. right? They're supposed to follow those laws because of their what? Their religion, their ancestry. Their nationality. Because those are laws that their family members are supposed to uphold. Islam. It's just like, for instance, let me give you an example. We all have our own family estates, right? And in our family estates, we create rules and regulations of how our family estates will be ran. It's that simple. Islam.
Islam.
All right. I hope that answered your question. Anyone else with any comments or questions? Because this is like a landmark act that was created, and we see that it's implemented in every state today. It's literally what has us bound in all other contracts. It begins at the county registrar.
I'm thinking that's a good person to put on notice.
A good person to put on notice.
Islam. I find this to be very interesting because I always was under the impression that the whole birth certificate, or putting us into the status of creating these certificates, came in 1933 with all of that reform and all of the Gold Act and all of the creation of the Social Security Administration. When in fact, this was 9 years earlier. So
Islam. That's right. I want to go to Title 15, right? Because Title 15 is where consumers, right? Consumers find their remedies, or there is remedy for consumers in Title 15, right? Let's see here. I'll go to Title 15, and I want to go to certificates of registration. So this is section 1057. So 15 U.S.C. section 1057, certificates of registration, because that's what the birth certificate is, correct?
Islam.
Islam. So it says issuance and form. Certificates of registration of marks registered upon the principal registrar shall be issued in the name of the United States of America under the seal of the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and shall be signed by the director or have his signature placed thereon, and a record thereof shall be kept in the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Now, if Indian is a trademark, wouldn't color, Negro, and wouldn't these be trademarks as well?
Definitely Islam.
African American, wouldn't these all be trademarks? I mean, don't they have even slave, right? Then they quote unquote come up with a code of how to make a slave. Isn't that what they said? It says the registration shall produce the mark. The registration shall produce the mark and state that the mark is registered on the principal register under this chapter. The date of the first use of the mark, the date of the first use of the mark in commerce, the particular goods or services for which it is registered, the number and date of the registration, the term thereof, the date on which the application for registration was received in the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and any conditions and limitations that may be imposed on the registration. I mean, this is what they do with certificates of registrations of marks every single day. And it starts at the county. Whenever a mistake has been made in a registration is showing has been made such that such mistake occurred in good faith through the fault of the applicant, the director is authorized to issue a certificate of correction, or in his discretion, a new certificate upon the payment of the prescribed fee, provided that the corrections do not involve such changes in the registration as to require republication of the mark. I mean, don't they publicize that the mark was created? Isn't that put on the public record?
Islam.
Islam. So this is how you enforce them to make corrections to the mark, because the mistake occurred in good faith, right? The good faith of who? Who made the good faith mistake? when they applied for
Yeah.
the birth certificate?
The informant,
Who's the informant?
your parent, Islam.
Islam. In good faith. So this is why we're supposed to honor our mothers and fathers. Hey, registrar. The applicant, aka the informant, my mother, she, in good faith, she made a mistake. Need this corrected. She made a mistake in good faith because at that time she didn't know that we wasn't African Americans. At that time she was miseducated. You know, at that time she didn't know that we were Moorish Americans because we're the descendants of the ancient Moabites who inhabited northwest and southwestern shores of Africa. At that time, when she made that mistake in good faith, she had no idea that my great grandfather was from the tribe of the Chata. My great grandmother was from the tribe of the Paw Monkey. Yeah, so we're gonna have to correct this. You got your documentation, so this is an easy fix. Yeah, she didn't know. Yeah, she was unaware. She made the mistake in good faith, believing that we were Christian property, but we're not. We actually are honoring our foremothers and forefathers' divine creed and principles, which is Islam. See how simple that is? When you make those corrections on the birth certificate, you know, the first thing they'll say is, you know, we took race off. Race is not on there. Yeah, I need the record, the application. The original application had race on there. That needs to be corrected. Because, you know, that's what the states are going to tell you. Oh, we don't have race on there anymore. You don't have to worry about that. That's cool. I need the original application corrected. Islam. So I have a template of some of the things that you can write on the original application to update it. Every state has a form to correct the birth certificate application. Islam? So, yeah, you just tell me you want to correct the birth certificate application. You know, these persons who change their sex have no problems when they do it on their applications. They don't have any problems. So if a person, which is a corporate fiction, has no problems with changing their sex, which only the great universal God Allah can do, then we shouldn't have any issues as well, because all we're doing is making corrections. We're not making any changes. We're making corrections to the application that the applicant, aka the informant, made, which was a mistake in good faith. Islam? Any comments or questions? All right, we're going to move on to the Virginia Eugenical Sterilization Act. It's 1924. Right, 1924. And it was entitled on March 20th, 1924, Virginia SB 281. The Eugenical Sterilization Act was signed into law, right? Under the Eugenical Sterilization Act, individuals confined to state institutions, right? So we're gonna make you a corporate fiction under the direction of the state. So now you are state property. So we're going to put you under an institution. Everyone with a birth certificate was put under, I don't know if whatever state health program they have, they put each and every one of us with the birth certificate under their Health and Human Services or their Human Resources, whatever they call it. It has the same function. It is a state institution. So you don't have to ever go to the public school institution. All you have to do is have a birth certificate. You never have to go to the penal institution. All you have to do is have a birth certificate. You're still registered in the state institution. Islam? It said that it afflicted with hereditary forms of insanity that a recurrent idiocy, imbecility, feeble-mindedness, or epilepsy could be sterilized. So if you are allowing yourself, especially in today, to be called a African American or a Black person, you're considered a beast of burden, an idiot, an imbecile, feeble-minded, insane. saying, Islam, it says, in order for a sterilization to take place under the 1924 Eugenical Sterilization Act, the superintendent of a colony. Hold on. What you mean, superintendent of a colony? There were no colonies in 1924. Those states. See how they recreated colonies just to put us back into enslavement? Whew. The superintendent of a colony or hospital had to present the case for each individual to be sterilized in the form of a petition to a special board of directors at said institution. A copy of this petition was also required to be presented to the patient and legal guardian of the patient. The application for the birth certificate to be registered to the registrar. "30 days after the board deemed an individual fit for sterilization, the sterilization was permitted to occur. Appeals were heard but rarely considered." You know why it was rarely considered? Because the informant signed up for you to participate in the sterilization program. No individual involved in this process could be held civilly or criminally liable. Additionally, nothing in the Eugenical Sterilization Act could prevent a legally licensed doctor from partaking in a medical procedure that could incidentally involve the nullification or destruction of reproductive functions. To you, property. Property don't have rights. Not when it's registered with the registrar. The registrar is holding it as the holder in due course, as the slaveholder. Because slavery ain't stopped on paper. Paper slavery is still going on to this day. The white Virginia elite of the time was immersed in the idea of perpetuating and protecting the purity of the American race, i.e. Anglo-Saxon whites. This socioeconomic, see, it ain't a race in real life. You see, quote unquote, American race. It's a social economic title. That's what white is. This socio-economic group wanted to maintain their traditional Southern identity while also embracing modern progressive ideology, because we can't physically put you into enslavement, but we can sure tax you to death. sterilize you, make you participate in all of these medical trials without giving you any of the side effects. And it wasn't, didn't they do that in Tuskegee? I'll continue. The eugenic movement offered an avenue to pursue both of these notions simultaneously through the embrace of eugenics as a progressive science and ideology. Virginians, see, they did it through science. Through the embrace of eugenics as a progressive science, pseudoscience, and ideology. Virginians were able to modernize their identity while maintaining the purity of their state through the coerced sterilization of minorities and undesirable whites alike. Yeah, they wasn't just doing it to us. It was about classism. It was the class. Often mongrels, right, these are the mixed races. Often mongrels and worthless whites were collected in mountain sweeps. This involved, listen to this, this involved a sheriff of a nearby town driving into mountain villages and forcibly removing individuals and taking them to institutions where they would only be released upon submission to sterilization. Now, this is just like, you know, when the police need to do get their quota for the weekend, right? They would do the sweep on the block. And if you had warrants, you know you're going to jail for the weekend. If you had anything on you, you know you're going to jail. And you're not getting out to the weekend because they're not going to let you see the magistrate until the weekend. This is to get their numbers. They get their numbers because they got to get their funding. It's all business. See, we need the funding because we got to be able to protect society. So we need the state to fund us. And then the state is saying, federal government, we need you to fund us to help us protect our society. See, here's the numbers of all of the bad men and women that we locked up, that the police went and rounded them up. Because they were all participating in illegal activities. You notice these illegal activities always got something to do with a statute, an ordinance, a code, where there's no actual injured party. But we all get rounded up because it started with the birth certificate. Islam, it says, more often than not, these individuals were unaware of the consequences of the procedures that they underwent. The sterilization of Virginia resident Carrie Buck is perhaps the most infamous case of sterilization in not only Virginia, but also the United States as a whole. Buck was deemed defective and institutionalized in the Virginia colony for epileptics and feeble-minded for years after her mother was similarly institutionalized. Buck was classified as feeble-minded after giving birth to an illegitimate child as a result of rape by relative of her foster family. Her daughter was subsequently deemed feeble-minded at the age of 6 months. How is it that a child at the age of 6 months given a diagnosis of being feeble-minded? Oh, see, your mother was feeble-minded, so you feeble-minded. Your daughter feeble-minded because you feeble-minded. You see how that works? Oh, you a Negro because your mother was a Negro. Your daughter is a Negro because you a Negro. Under accusations of hereditary defectiveness, accusations, not facts. Isn't it always these accusations that's put on us? Aren't we accused of some quote unquote crime? And remember, all these crimes are commercial, right? This is what they said. Islam?
Islam says.
Oh,
I mean, didn't they say that all the crimes are commercial?
Yes, they did. Islam.
Islam. They said it right here. 27 CFR section 72.11, meaning of terms. Commercial crimes. Any of the following types of crimes, federal or state, offenses against the revenue laws, offenses against the revenue laws. So why are folks going to jail or serving Fed time for tax evasion? Because those are laws that's given by the Internal Revenue, right? Tax evasion, money laundering, right? These are all revenue laws. Burglary, counterfeiting. Ain't that a quote unquote federal offense? Forgery, kidnapping, larceny, robbery, illegal sale, possession of a deadly weapon. How many brothers and sisters right now in a penal institution because of these commercial crimes? Prostitution, including soliciting, procuring, pandering, white slaving. Ain't that what they gave R. Kelly? The Mann Act? White slavery? Keeping house of ill fame and like offenses, extortion, swindling, and confidence games. And attempting to commit, conspiring to commit, or compounding any of the forgery crimes. Addiction to narcotic drugs and use of marijuana will be treated as if it's such were commercial crime. So why are these addicts in prison for these commercial crimes? They said it was commercial crimes. Those accusations. Carrie Buck faced a series of trials and appeals used to legitimize her pending sterilization. She was defended by Aubrey Strode, a known supporter of sterilization, whose defense focused more on the potential benefits of Buck's sterilization than the consequences. Oh, don't worry about it. She needs to be put into enslavement. Enslavement is going to help her. Her and everyone else like her that we deem to be enslaved. On paper, Islam. So this is why they can come in your house, kick your door in, take your children, kidnap your children, and it's okay. Nonetheless, with the 1927 Supreme Court ruling in Buck versus Bell, sterilization was legitimized and Buck was consequently sterilized to prevent the birth of more defective individuals. It was said by Supreme Court Justice Oliver Holmes that 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. This is crazy.
Yes, absolutely. They call it this. They're using law and records.
Yep.
Called imbeciles.
Yep. This is what they're doing to us today.
That's right.
It hasn't stopped.
That's why the prophet came along. That's why the prophet was sent.
We're going to enslave you because we want to enslave you. We're going to make up laws to say that it's okay to enslave you. And even your public defender is going to give you a plea bargain because of these accusations while you being enslaved. Because we ain't got no inter party. We're just making it up as we go. Islam?
That's right.
This is crazy. It's supposed to be her attorney that's supposed to be in her defense. Said that she needs to continue to be enslaved, aka sterilized, because it's good for her. And then the Supreme Court Justice said 3 generations of imbeciles is enough. We don't need no more imbeciles. Keep her sterilized. It's crazy. Sterilize her. Woo. On March 20th, 1924, the same day as the passage of the SB 28-1, the Eugenical Sterilization Act, Virginia signed into law SB 219, the Racial Integrity Act. Y'all see how they both at the same time, on the same day. This is how you get you a good paper slave. Mm-mm-mm. They use science. They use science to put us in these contracts. And the prophet used science to get us out. Ain't that something?
That's right.
Wow. Under this piece of legislation, it became unlawful for any white person in Virginia to marry any person, save a white person. Racial Integrity Act. The Racial Integrity Act garnered lots of public attention, allowing the sterilization law. Written by Carrie Buck's defense lawyer. It was written by her defense lawyer, the law. To pass without much public notice. The Virginia sterilization law was paramount to be perceived legality of sterilization throughout the country. With the Carrie Buck Supreme Court case of 1927, the American Eugenics Movement, see, this is the American Eugenics Movement. What's the name of our movement?
Moorish Movement.
Divine and National Islam.
Islam, Moorish National Movement. So you see how their movement is creating legislation? You see how their movement is creating legislation? What happened to the Moors? Moors fell asleep at the wheel. The American Eugenics Movement gained the legitimacy necessary to avoid adversity in various courts. This ruling precipitated high rates of sterilization in Virginia and throughout the rest of the United States. This sterilization pattern continued throughout the first half of the 20th century until rates began to decline in the mid-1950s. In both 1956 and 1962, bills were proposed that allowed for compulsory sterilization of women with multiple illegitimate children. Both bills fell. Furthermore, with the issue of recommendation number 6 of the commission to study problems relating to children born out of wedlock in 1959, compulsory sterilization was seriously questioned for the first time since its legalization. Even in the presence of such concern, the 1961 report of the Virginia Advisory Legislative Council recommended no change to the sterilization statute because there had been no substantial complaint. At this time, every other state in the nation, with the exception of North Carolina, had found reason to stop or slow sterilization. Virginia enacted additional voluntary sterilization legislation in 1962, which allowed women to volunteer to be sterilized as a birth control measure. In order to qualify for voluntary sterilization, women needed to be married and to have obtained spousal consent. Virginia's current law, enacted in the 1980s, only allows for those with a need of contraception, Planned Parenthood, who have no other options in obtaining it to be sterilized. Patients can be sterilized involuntarily, but the process one must go through before gaining permission to involuntarily sterilize a patient is very protective. To Virginians, there seemed to be little difference between the harm to society caused by minorities and harm caused by undesirable whites. Oh, it doesn't matter. These are paper slaves. During the time of sterilization, 22% of those sterilized were quote unquote African American. This is roughly proportionate to the 25% of the total population represented by African Americans. So you mean to tell us 22% was sterilized? There was a total of 20% that wasn't sterilized. Wow. In Virginia, sterilization rates were fairly proportionate to population representation. It's population control. We want to kill off all of your future generation because naturally, y'all birth more babies than we do. So we're gonna make you paper slaves and we gonna kill you off. Because our greatest fear is to go back under the conditions that we was under European slavery. Islam. For this reason, a wide array of individuals became targets for sterilization, specifically mongrels, minorities of poor whites. Mongrels are those who were considered to be non-white heritage. In the opinion of Virginia, non-white was defined as any individual with any ancestor of any race but Caucasian, excluding those with 1/16 or less Native American blood. Additionally, institutionalized females who worked outside of the institution were sterilized at a higher rate than others due to their perceived risk of promiscuous interaction with the normal public. After World War II, the numbers of men becoming sterilized increased due to ex-soldiers' mental problems and alcoholism. But ain't that what's that generation called? What do they call that generation? World War II.
Baby boom.
Baby boom. But at the same time, they're saying that record numbers of men became sterilized because of mental health problems and alcoholism. Islam says after Brown versus Board of Education, 1954, racist eugenics became more prominent. It's already been prominent. It was already prominent. Right here it said 22% of those sterilized were quote unquote African American. This is roughly proportionate to the 20% of the total population represented by African Americans. How you got more of a race that's sterilized than it is of the race? Make it make sense. Islam? The total portion of quote unquote African Americans was 20%. And 22% of quote unquote African Americans, they sterilized. Daggone, we still continue to make children to reproduce. What is it about those people that no matter what we continue to do to them, they still seem to be able to not only survive, but excel in their survival? Said racist eugenics became more prominent. In 1954, Supreme Court case brought a resurgence of racist eugenics called massive resistance, to prevent desegregation. Racist eugenics once again came into discussion with the 1962 and 1964 proposed laws for punitive sterilization of welfare mothers. Here we go. Of welfare mothers with illegitimate children. There was some fear that African, Far Eastern, Indian, and African American populations were expanding far more rapidly than others. And these proposed laws were in part to target such communities. Even with the voluntary sterilization law, there was some concern that a woman might consent to being sterilized if strongly advised by a physician to do so. Planned Parenthood. This trust in physicians could have given them the power to influence women to undergo sterilization for ultimately eugenic purposes. On March 20th, 1924, the same day as the passage of SB 281, Virginia signed into law SB 219, the Racial Integrity Act. Under this piece of legislation, to become unlawful for any white person in Virginia to marry any person save a white person. SB 219, Racial Integrity Act. Islam. I'm gonna put this link in the chat for everyone so you can check this out. You can read more up on it. But yeah, Moors. Not only we're gonna sterilize you, but we are going to also, create these paper chattel slave contracts with you, and you don't even know it. You have no idea. You don't even know it. Eugenics as Indian removal. Socio-historical process of the deconstruction of American Indians in the Southeast. Although research on the history of the eugenics movement in the United States is legion, its impact on state policies that identify and define American Indians has yet to be fully addressed. The exhibit, Our Lives, Contemporary Life and Identities, ongoing until September 21st, 2014, at the National Museum of the American Indian, provides a provocative vehicle for examining how eugenics inform public policy during the first quarter of the 20th century, served to remove from official records Native peoples throughout the Southeast 1 century after Indian removal of the antebellum era, Native peoples in the American Southeast provide an important but often overlooked example of how racial policies that time-rooted eugenics affected a documentary erasure of Native peoples and communities. And this is by Angela Gonzalez, Judy Curtis, and Gabrielle Tayak. All right, it is getting late. We're gonna close up here. Next week we'll go into this, and we'll go over the template to update the birth certificate in Islam. We got any comments or questions before we close out?
A comment, Islam Moore.
Islam.
My brief comment is that the law governs all events. Islam. It was surely demonstrated tonight. Gratitude, governors.
Islam. Gratitude. Indeed, Prophet Noble Ali was right. I mean, they did it with science, and he came and redeemed us through science. And this is why, you know, when you look around, everybody is always constantly talking about the Moors and how much vitriol they have for Moors. It's just crazy. You know, it's like, what did Moors do to the world that everyone, especially the ones that look like us, they have this great disdain of Moors?